the Growing Towards God podcast. Here on Growing Towards God, we talk about ways to grow spiritually and hear how God has been working in people's lives. My name is Virginia, and I'm so excited that you're here today. Thank you for listening, so now let's get to the good stuff. Hello, Growing Towards God fam. Last week, it was my birthday, whoop whoop, and I went to New York City for a few days with some of my family, and I got dinner with my friends, and it was a really fun day. I felt very loved, and that's always a nice feeling to have. But this week, I wanted to share about a list that I made before my birthday last year of all the things I wanted to do during the year, and it's called 20 Things to Do When I'm 20. I'm sure some of you have heard of this list of mine before, but I kind of wanted to talk about it and why I did it and how it impacted me. So how I thought of this kind of started with the idea of follow through. Follow through is how your actions align with your words. And I was listening to another podcast, and she was saying that in order to expect other people to value you, you have to value yourself first. And that just kind of stuck with me, the idea of how you value yourself and your own desires. Do you value them? In the different ways and shapes that can take form. And so it can sound kind of selfish, and I do believe that there can be a prideful element to valuing yourself if you don't have a posture of humility with it. But I think of valuing myself more as a deep caring for myself. And Jesus even talks about this when the Pharisees asked him which of the commandments is the greatest in Matthew 22, starting in verse 34. So it says, "Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: 'Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?' Jesus replied, 'Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments.'" So in this passage, Jesus says that the first and most important thing is to fully love God. The second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I think his inclusion of as yourself in his response ties into this, because you can't love your neighbors well if you aren't loving yourself well. An example that I thought of was if you're hangry because you're choosing not to eat and you lash out at someone or have road rage, that's not loving your neighbor as a result of not loving yourself. And so basically, it's about loving your neighbors out of an overflow of love for yourself. And love for yourself comes from knowing how loved you are by God, and that Jesus died on the cross for you and would die on the cross for you even if you were the only person alive. And so a deep care for yourself as reverence and respect for God's creation. You are God's creation and deserving of love and care because you are created. So it's important to care for yourself and have a deep respect for your identity as God's creation so that you can love others in the way that God loves you. They're all kind of tied together. And there is discernment needed with this, idea of loving yourself and boundaries that you can set so that you are loving your neighbors with your actions out of an overflow of love for God. And I think you can go down a hole of justifying your sin by framing it as loving yourself. And I want to be clear that that is not what I'm saying, but rather that it's okay and good to care about yourself and invest in yourself, and that can be honoring to God. So anyways, this idea of valuing yourself and deeply caring that leads to follow through really stuck with me, because I think it's easy to know things that you want to do, but you just put them off and say, "Oh, I'll do it another time." But another time becomes code for when I have time, and most people don't have a lot of extra time in their lives. So things that you actually really want to do never get accomplished. And for me, that just felt really unsatisfying, not being willing to make time for the things that I really want to do. So self-check-in here. Think about yourself for a second. Would you describe yourself as someone who follows through, who is a person of their word? Or are you someone that maybe struggles with overcommitting and just not doing the things that you actually really want to do? Or letting your yes be yes and your no be no? Be a little self-aware, pause, whatever. It's really easy to overcommit yourself, but just a reminder that you can say no even to good things. It's something that takes some practice, but you can do it. But so basically, this list came from when I was thinking about ways that I could start following through for myself. And I thought about things that I've always wanted to do and said that I would do, but never actually got around to for whatever reason, and just like not making the time for. And so whether they were unmet goals or random things or ways I wanted to grow, and I just started listing every time I thought of something, and then it became an actual thing that I created with the intent of completing all of these tasks when I was 20. So, what was on the list, you may be wondering? I can do a reveal. I'll read them all and explain a little. Yeah, 20 things I want to do when I'm 20. Read Pride and Prejudice. So good. Run once a week. Open a Roth IRA. Talk about God more. This one is ironic because when I made this list, I hadn't even had the idea of having a podcast. But I wanted to talk about God more. And like now I have this podcast. So God is so cool, guys. Go in the European side of the Atlantic Ocean. Scream on top of a mountain. Dance with a stranger. Go on 20 friend dates with Sasha. Fly a kite. Paint an acrylic painting of one of my Ireland pictures. Walk up the 26 floors of the library at my school. Read the Book of Psalms. Bake a loaf of Irish brown bread. Buy a leather jacket. Do 20 cartwheels in a row. Drink champagne by the Eiffel Tower at night. That one's kind of silly. Take an airplane flying lesson. Get better at saying no, even to good things. Hear the organ played in St. Patrick's Cathedral. And swim in Ireland. So those were my 20 things. You know, there's kind of a wide variety. And I actually did all of these things. Checking things off of a list is always super satisfying to me. So being able to say that I did all of these things is so cool. And I actually have a lot of fun facts now. So I highly recommend doing a list at some point in your life. It doesn't have to be 20 things to do when I'm 20. You know, I just thought it had a nice ring to it. But it could be 1 month you make a list of 3 things. Or even small things, and you don't even need a list. It could be a weekly thing where you pick one thing that you're going to do for yourself, or a daily thing. It could be whatever you want. But basically the point is to follow through. So like start with small things. Like today I said I was going to take a walk, but I ended up being really busy, so I get to have 5 minutes to take a short walk and get some fresh air. Or, you know, today I said I wasn't going to go on Instagram, so I just offloaded it from my phone for the day. Something like that. Those are just a couple examples. But throughout going through being 20 and doing all these things, one thing that I noticed is that I started to value my own word more when I followed through for myself. So like, I've talked about this before, but words are so important. But I learned that like my words are important to others and to myself. So often we're the first ones to break promises to ourselves, and I think that being unreliable for yourself can lead to a lot of different struggles. And totally show yourself some grace, and you totally can't get everything done all the time, and there's things that might take longer to accomplish. But if there's something that you want to do, then go do it. Go after it. Go get it. Following through is about valuing yourself enough and having the willpower to treat yourself with deep care. And you can't follow through for others if you can't even follow through for yourself. That's definitely something that I've learned and seen and observed in people. But you know who always follows through? God. He's never forgotten about a promise or let any of his children down by being unreliable. He's more reliable than the most reliable person that you know. He's so consistent and trustworthy, even in the midst of our questioning or lack of understanding in any situation. He's just so good, and I really cling to that when I feel let down by anything, you know, that God has never let me down, and he will never let me down, and he will never let you down. I hope this encouraged you and fired you up to follow through for yourself. My challenge to you is to, after this episode, think about one thing you want to do for yourself this week. It could be going for a walk or a run, journaling, doing something creative, making yourself a nice meal, doing something that you've been saying you'll do for weeks. It could be literally anything, but write it down after this episode and actually do it this week. Commit to doing it. Practice doing things that you say you're going to do for yourself. And I think you'll find that as you make this a habit, you'll be more able to follow through for others too. That's been my experience. But anyways, thank you for listening and have a blessed week. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope you took something meaningful away from this discussion and know that God loves you so much and desires a personal relationship with you. If you'd like to stay up to date with episodes, follow me on Instagram at Growing Towards God Pod and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Before I go, I'd like you to take this benediction into your life and let the Lord's goodness empower you today. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Have a great rest of your day and catch you next time on the Growing Towards God podcast.